Squid Game is full of funny moments, from Thanos dancing around with Namyu to nobody laughing at the frontman's joke. I'll be going over every funny moment in Squid Game, starting with one of the funniest. In Season 1, Episode 1, we've already met Song Gi-hun and know how much of a comical guy he can be. Seeing him gambling on horses with his friend Park Young-bae, who we eventually see more of in the next season, and celebrating getting a prize at a claw machine with the random kid who helped him, are moments where Ji-hun is acting funny without knowing it. But after his daughter's disastrous birthday dinner, Ji-hun tries getting home, only to miss his train. He's then approached by the recruiter, who has an offer for him. The recruiter asks Ji-hun to play a game of Didakchi with him, offering him 100,000 won if Ji-hun wins, while requesting the same amount in return. After losing the first game and having no money to pay, Ji-hun is slapped by the recruiter as a form of payment. What follows is an amusing montage of Ji-hun continuously losing and getting slapped by the recruiter. The weird situation and Ji-hun's clear irritation at his constant failure makes the scene a moment that is by far one of the funniest, and they only get funnier from here. All of us are familiar with the annoying yet hilarious character of Han Min-yul. She had plenty of great moments in the series, like the way she went out in the game glass stepping stones. But one of the most memorable is the stunt she pulled with Kang Se-byek in this scene. After Min-yul convinces the guards to allow her to use the bathroom in the night, Se-byek tags along with her and climbs into the vents with some assistance from Min-yul. Trying to buy some time for Se-byek, Min-yul begins screaming about her constipation problems and probably traumatizes the Triangle soldier standing guard outside in the process. This goes on until the guard eventually becomes impatient and barges into the bathroom to drag him out of there. Se-byek fortunately finishes her scouting in the vents in the nick of time, and the segment concludes with the humorous scene of the Triangle guard walking in on Min-yul and Se-byek in a stall, with the latter holding toilet paper for Min-yul's supposed constipation. This was a hilarious scene to watch for us viewers, but we can't say the same for the poor Triangle guard who had to witness all of that. Up next, we have another moment from Episode 3 of Season 1 from the game Sugar Honeycombs, more commonly known as Dalgona. The task for this game was to carve a shape from honeycomb candy. Cho Sang-woo, Ji-hun's friend, realized this after seeing the shapes and remembering that Se-byek told him the guards were melting sugar, and picked the easiest shape, triangle, for himself. Surprisingly, he didn't share this information with his team, resulting in Gi-hun picking the shape umbrella. We all probably thought that Ji-hun was screwed after he picked it, as it was the hardest shape to carve. Fortunately, he notices that his sweat that dripped onto the cookie thinned it out a bit. Of course, he instantly began furiously licking it, to the shock and maybe concern of the other people in the room. It was a bit gross seeing him get up close and personal with the cookie, sure, but once all the other players began doing it as well, the scene became a lot more funny. Even the square guard watching the security footage was surprised at what he was seeing, which added on to the hilarity of the scene. Ultimately, the cookie licking was what saved Ji-hun right before the timer reached 0, although we unfortunately can't say the same for the other unlucky players who copied his strategy. Maybe they would have survived if they were the main character. Marbles, the fourth game that took place in Season 1, is definitely one of the saddest in the season. The game takes place in the 4th decade of the 6th century. So much time has passed since then that damage is done, and even the same person from old carts with honor bags has altered his ways and fate until this point. He has witnessed a killing of his brother, and he does not know what he should do. Like many of the second season, the game centers around the 7 women who die in the killing, from the witches of Season 1 who turn to supernatural vengeance when the game centers around the 7 women who die in the killing. From the witches of Season 1 who die in the killing, from the witches of Season 2 who turn to supernatural vengeance when the game centers around the 7 women who die, players being forced to compete against their loved ones or closest friends makes for some emotional moments, like Sang-woo's betrayal of Ali or Il-nam's supposed death. As sad as this episode was, there was one scene that stood out from the others due to how comedic it was. In that scene, one of the villains of Season 1, Jiang Doksu, is playing against one of his goons, player 278. They're playing the same odd or even guessing game that Ji-hun and Il-nam were playing with each other, and Deoksu is losing. With almost no marbles left, a desperate Deoksu asks the guard to let them play a new game, saying that he should be allowed to pick one in the name of equality. The guard surprisingly accepts his request, and to the disappointment of player 278, they begin a new game. The two begin playing a game where they have to roll their marbles into a hole that Deoksu dug, and we get the disturbing line where player 278 says he's pretty good at getting things into holes. Anyway, the two continue their game, and by a crazy stroke of luck, the marble player 278 has it rolls towards the hole and knocks one of Deoksu's marbles into the pit, causing Deoksu to win the game. Player 278, despite all of his taunting and big talk, pathetically begins running away from the area before being quickly sent to the pearly gates by the triangle guards. Guess he wasn't as experienced as he thought he was. Moving on to Season 2, the first episode is filled with funny moments, such as the loan shark searching for the recruiter based off of a badly drawn sketch, which we'll talk about later. But the scene that really takes the cake, other than the Russian roulette scene, is the hilarious bread and lottery sequence. The recruiter buys a large amount of lottery tickets and bread, unknowingly being told by two of the loan sharks that Ji-hun hired to track him. He then heads to the park and offers the homeless people there a choice, a bread roll or a lottery ticket. The majority of the people choose the lottery ticket to the disappointment of the recruiter. After going to every person in the park, he heads to the center and, to everyone's surprise, dumps out the bread and begins destroying it like a maniac. The ludicrousness of the scene paired with the crazy actions of the recruiter already makes the scene hilarious, but the best part of it was the reactions of the bystanders. The shock, confusion, and vicarious embarrassment the people watching must have felt is the icing on the cake of this already great scene. Speaking of Season 2's first episode, we have the scene where the thugs Ji-hun hired with his winnings are being instructed about who the recruiter was and where to find him. The aforementioned bad sketch of the recruiter, combined with the thug's enthusiasm to catch him for the cash, is just hilarious. The following montage of the thugs taking selfies at all of the subway stations while searching for the recruiter and asking random people if they've ever seen them with demonstrations of the game Dakuchi he plays with people adds to the hilarity of the scene. The goofy music playing in the background is a perfect added bonus to the scene. The thugs continue with searching people's briefcases and interrogating anybody they see wearing a suit. None of them manage to find him at the time, but they all soldier on, motivated by the sweet paycheck and a promised 500 million won bonus for catching him. Their determination to catch the recruiter just for the money is admirable as well as funny, although the two loan sharks who did manage to catch him were probably surprised when they found out. What a psycho he really was during the whole bread and lottery sequence we talked about earlier. Something new introduced in Season 2 was the voting that took place after every game. During voting, players must press either X to stop the games or O to continue them. Ji-hun obviously votes X and tries to convince everyone to do the same, but his efforts are unfortunately in vain due to the frontman, Hwang In-ho, posing as player 1. Right before he's meant to vote, there's a tie between the two sides, which In-ho breaks by pressing O to continue the games. Ji-hun and the rest of the X's are disappointed as they are forced to continue playing the ruthless death games. Later, while Ji-hun and his friend Youngbae, who we first met in Season 1, are talking, they're approached by In-ho and a crowd of other people asking for help. Since Ji-hun said that he's played the games before, Ji-hun relents and tells them that the second game he played was Dalgona and that they had to carve shapes out of honeycomb candy. Youngbae asks which shape was the easiest and which was the hardest, and Ji-hun tells them triangle and umbrella respectively. Once In-ho heard umbrella, however, he immediately made fun of the fact that some players picked the umbrella and said that those unlucky bastards must have bitten the dust, all while Ji-hun gave him an incredulous stare. Since the frontman watched the Dalgona game that took place all those years ago, he obviously knew that Ji-hun was one of the unlucky few that picked Umbrella and just wanted to mess with him, which makes the scene even better when you realize that fact. The six-legged pentathlon is one of the new games introduced in Season 2. It's unique because it's not just one game the players have to beat, but a series of them played in teams of 5. Some were certainly better at the games than others, which was unfortunately proven by player 198's team. You might know him as the guy who failed miserably while playing the game Flying Stone for his team, which ended up costing them the game and getting them killed. His team started off quite confident, passing the first game with ease. Sadly, their luck ended there. Player 198 failed his his first throw, then his second, then his third, and almost every single one after that. The one time he managed to hit the stone, it didn't even count as he stepped over the line. This alone is enough to make this scene chuckle-worthy, but his team's reactions were what made the scene even better, along with the cheery, upbeat music playing in the background. They went from confident to furious to eventually just expecting failure. When player 198 finally hits his throw, his team doesn't even have it in them to cheer. They just berate him for his incompetence. One person leading to a whole team's death is sad, sure, but the presentation of the whole sequence makes this one of the more memorable and funny scenes. Speaking of the six-legged pentathlon, there's another scene in there that was just too absurd to not include here. As you probably know, the six-legged pentathlon requires each member of a team of 5 to complete one of the following games: Dokji, Flying Stone, Jongi, Spinning Top, and Jigi. Gi-hoon's team, which consisted of Kim Eun-hee, Yeonbae, In-ho, Kang Dae-ho, and himself, were the last ones to go, because if they lost, no players would be there to witness the guards sparing the frontman from death. In-ho decided to take the game's spinning top, but unfortunately things didn't go so well for him. In-ho repeatedly fails to get the top to spin by itself, and after somehow launching the top behind him and wasting time, he finally loses it. He starts yelling and hitting himself, while the team just kind of stares at him in concern, before Ji-hoon finally stops him. Daeho's reaction is probably the funniest, as he looks quite concerned at the frontman's over-the-top reaction to constantly failing. It's not really known if he was doing it on purpose or not, but either way, watching him go off the rails like that is one of the funnier moments in this episode. As we mentioned earlier, the frontman, also known as Hwang In-ho, joined the games as player 1 in season 2. We all know how ruthless he can be, as he shot his brother off of a cliff in season 1, but in season 2 he was regularly cracking jokes with Ji-hoon's group, although they didn't always land like this one. In episode 5 of season 2, when Ji-hoon's group are all sharing their names, Gi-hoon Ho seems to find Gi-hoon's quite funny. He points out that Ji-hoon's last name, Song, literally means last name, and begins laughing, while everybody else just stares at him unamused. Can't exactly blame them, as it's pretty rude to laugh at somebody else's name. That was only in the original Korean version, however. In the English dub, instead of making fun of Gi-hoon's name, In-ho says that Gi-hoon is their unsung hero, which is less disrespectful, but the joke unfortunately still doesn't land for the group. In-ho laughing at his own joke while nobody else does is funny on its own, but the looks he gets from the rest of the group make it even funnier, especially the little chuckle of pity Ji-hoon gives him before the scene ends. Everybody knows and loves the purple-haired former rapper Thanos, who's always being followed around by his loyal minion Nam Gi-yu. He's one of the most unpredictable characters in the series due to him constantly taking drugs he smuggled into the game. Practically every scene that he's in is made funnier thanks to him and the Mingle game that took place in episode 6. In Mingle, Thanos clearly isn't taking the game very seriously, as you can see him dancing with his pal Namgyu while everyone was waiting to get into their rooms. In the second round, 4 people were needed in a room, and Thanos decided to leave behind Kyung-soo, one of his loyal fans, resulting in the popular clip of Thanos kicking Kyung-soo out, literally. After Thanos and his group get into their room, Thanos finally seems to realize Kyung-soo is missing and asks where he is. He panics and shouts for him through the window in the door, but at that point it's too late. Thanos kicking out his minion and completely forgetting about it is hilariously in character and definitely one of the best moments of the episode. It's a shame we won't get to see more of him in season 3, because it would